Welcome to Bed Crime Stories podcast. I'm your host, T. To my bed crimers, hi, how are you doing? I hope you're having a great day. To anyone new here, a warm welcome. Thank you for checking out the channel. Let me just ask that after watching and or listening to this video, if you find you enjoyed it or learned something, do me a favor, smash the like button. It's free, it's easy, and it really helps with the algorithm. Let's chat a little bit more about Delphi suspect Richard Allen and his defense team's theory that a group of men from Delphi and Rushville, Indiana, who allegedly practice an ancient Nordic religion called Odinism and who are also allegedly white nationalists, committed the crime against Libby German and Abby Williams, and Richard Allen, according to the defense, doesn't practice Odinism and is not involved in the crime. The defense is requesting a Frank's hearing because they believe law enforcement obtained a probable cause search warrant for Allen's property without having probable cause and by leaving out important information related to this Odinism angle. Law enforcement located a firearm at Allen's home that through ballistic tests reportedly linked it to an unspent bullet found near the girl's bodies at the crime scene. That bullet appears to be the only piece of physical evidence that ties Richard Allen to the actual crime scene. Thus, it's a critical part of the prosecution's case against Allen. Because of that, the defense wants to get that bullet deemed inadmissible, and they're trying to say it was seized in a search that should not have taken place. But again, Richard Allen confessed, reportedly, to his wife on the phone, and he also told the authorities he was at the trail system on the day the crime occurred, February 13th of 2017. Back to Odinism. Before I get too deep into this, let me explain that Odinism is the religion, an Odinite is a person following that religion, and odinist is the adjective that would be used to describe something like, for example, odinist runes or symbols. Odinism is the modern revival of an ancient religion widely practiced by various people throughout Northern Europe, primarily the Norse, Vikings. Odinism goes under many names. To those who study the religion from the outside, it may be called Germanic neo-paganism. The revival of the ancient religion began in the 20th century. Today, neo-Nazism has become, unfortunately, associated with Odinism. But not all people who are into Odinism are neo-Nazis. I found the following explanation of all of this on a website called thevikingworldpbworks.com. This is an excerpt from that website. Perhaps the most controversial tag with folkish Odinism has been that it is inherently racist. While some Odinists may be racist, not all are. Many who align themselves with the Asatru tag, which apparently is another name for Odinism, try desperately to distance themselves from being attached to the neo-Nazis, white supremacists, or other racially aware organizations. One webmaster of a popular Asatru site posted the following after finding out his site had been attached to neo-Nazi sites. He wrote, "It has been the sad fate of Asatru to have had our faith hijacked by some subhuman maggots who are trying to hitch their sick and twisted political wagon to our faith. It is the position of the Raven kindred, Asatru today, myself personally, and all legitimate Asatruar, that race and ethnicity are completely irrelevant to Asatru and Norse paganism. Asatru is a religion. It is open to anyone who wishes to join it. Those persons who would limit its membership on the basis of race, sex, sexual preference, or other such criteria are not only mentally challenged, but are traitors to the gods. If the gods call someone to their service, it is not our business to deny them based on their genetic origin. To do so is to go against the gods, and thus is to commit treason against Asgard." End quote. Not being an expert in Odinism, I will end the definition there. If any nature, peace-loving, and mead-loving Odinites want to come on the channel to share their perspective, please contact me. The Odinist connection in the Delphi murders case was born out of the crime scene and the arrangements of branches and sticks that were found on top of the victims, Libby German and Abby Williams. Some in law enforcement found the crime scene, quote, ghoulish, and thought it possible that the branches and sticks were intentionally arranged in patterns to form odinist runes, which are symbols or letters. There was also a pattern of blood on a tree that Libby's left arm was posed upward toward and touching. Those who saw a possible odinist connection thought blood on the tree, which was found to be Libby's blood, could have been deliberately painted there to form the letter F. Both girls died by slashes to their necks. Libby was found without clothing. Abby was dressed in some of Libby's clothing. So clearly whoever did this intentionally dressed Abby and put Libby's arm in that outstretched manner touching the tree. But a reporter named Barbara McDonald, who created the podcast Down the Hill, the Delphi Murders, and who has sources said to be close to the investigation, said they told her they believe the blood on the tree is likely a partial palm print left by the perpetrator, and the branches were in no specific pattern, but were simply used to camouflage or conceal the bodies. It's important to consider that the defense has a job to do, and that is to create reasonable doubt as to their client's guilt. So this could simply be a defense strategy based on some detectives' theories that the deaths could be related to Odinism and the crime committed could have been a religious sacrifice. But the theory may also have merit. We don't have access to all the evidence, including photos of the actual crime scene, so we can't really know just exactly how that crime scene looked. Here is how Allen's defense team supported the Odinist theory. And again, note, they did not dream this up or pull it out of their derrieres. They found information in the case files that indicated some detectives felt Odinites in Delphi and Rushville, Indiana, could be involved. The defense cited 3 law enforcement officers who focused on what's been referred to as the Odinite angle. They were the Rushville Assistant Police Chief Todd Click and 2 detectives, Officers Greg Ferenczi and Kevin Murphy. Click became concerned after reading the information in Richard Allen's probable cause affidavit. He felt that the information in it, pointing to Richard Allen as the perpetrator, was far less compelling than the totality of the information he and detectives Ferenczi and Murphy had gathered during their Rushville portion of the investigation. So it sounds like Delphi law enforcement and the Indiana State Police asked Rushville law enforcement to assist with the investigation into the crime. Per the defense, these 3 officers connected some men who practiced Odinism that were living in or near Delphi to another group of male followers of Odinism living in Rushville, and then connected both of those groups to the Delphi murders, which took place in Delphi on February 13th of 2017. In their 136-page memo, the defense also claims that some men following Odinism are employed as corrections officers for the Indiana Department of Corrections at Westville Correctional Facility, which is where Richard Allen is currently incarcerated, namely Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones. The lawyers say these officers wore patches that read, "In Odin We Trust," and posted Odinist symbols on their Facebook pages. And most importantly, per the defense, they allegedly have been threatening Richard Allen and not affording him privacy during visits with his wife and legal team. Rushville Assistant Police Chief Todd Click was so concerned about the Delphi investigators getting this wrong that he consulted a lawyer to help him draft a letter to Delphi prosecutor Nick McLeland. Now, in the defense's recently published memo, they claim that the Delphi prosecutors never shared Click's letter with them until it was obvious they, meaning the defense, were going to be interviewing Click. The defense is further claiming that McLeland had the letter for 4 months before he shared it with them. This type of material should be part of what's called discovery, meaning evidence, and as such, it should have been shared with the defense. The defense is now saying that they believe the information in Click's letter would be exculpatory for Richard Allen, meaning it would serve to clear him of guilt in the case. The defense is saying that the prosecutors deliberately kept this letter from them, along with other exculpatory evidence, because they were intent on making Richard Allen the perpetrator. The other so-called exculpatory evidence the defense cited is 1, an 85-page compilation of reports by Assistant Police Chief Click, prepared in 2019, a 12-page report called the Odin Report within the 85-page compilation. The Odin Report was written by a trooper along with Indiana State Police, and it appears that most of the info in it came from the sister of an alleged Odinite named Elvis. I'm not going to share his last name. His sister's name is Mary J. And 3, several videos containing statements that support the defense theory of Richard Allen's innocence. The defense also mentions a 4th item, and that is that Click said the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, or BAU, which is their unit for profiling criminals, determined that the individuals responsible for the homicides were involved in Nordic beliefs. The defense claims this is yet another tidbit of evidence that the prosecution failed to share with them. However, in the memo, it says that one Delphi officer told the defense that he doesn't remember the FBI's BAU determining either way if the perpetrator or perpetrators followed Nordic beliefs. Bottom line, the defense is saying the heads of the investigation dismissed this Odinism angle early on before they'd fully researched it and checked out 5 men whose names Click, Ferenczi, and Murphy mentioned in that 85-page report as being allegedly involved in both white nationalism and Odinism. The first alleged Odinite cited is a man named Brad Holder. Holder's son dated Abby, and Becky Patty shared Holder's name with the authorities after the crime because Abby had dated his son. Per the defense, Brad Holder allegedly posted images somewhat mimicking the runes, or rather possible ruins, found at the crime scene on his social media after the crime. Again, runes are symbols, and some of the detectives believe that branches placed over the bodies were mimicking certain runes. Note that at the time, no information about the crime scene had been made public. So Click and the detectives were like, how can this guy be sharing images that we think we see at the crime scene if he isn't involved in the crime? How would he know this stuff? The defense says that Holder also allegedly taunted the police with social media posts and left clues on his Facebook page pointing to his involvement in the crime. But Brad Holder is now looking for a lawyer because he's claiming the defense has defamed him in their memo. The defense also said they found it, quote, mind-blowing that Brad Holder was never considered a suspect and was cleared as quickly as March 16th of 2017. So that would have been a little more than a month after the crime occurred. Holder's alibi for the time of the crime in Delphi is that he was at work. The defense feels that the alibi was not fully vetted. They note that on April 12th of 2017, the investigators received a call from a man in Georgia. I'll call him Ryan B., who was doing some research of his own on the case and who discovered disturbing images on Holder's social media account, likely the one I just described for you. The man in Georgia said he wanted to do some research when he learned that Abby had dated this man's son. One of the images Brad Holder allegedly posted was of 2 women, either dead or posed as if dead, on the ground in a forest. Both women had tree limbs and sticks arranged over their bodies, and one woman had her arm outstretched over her head. But note that both women in the image were fully clothed, and the branch formations were different from what was seen at the crime scene in Delphi. Remember, Libby was not wearing clothes, so clearly the image Holder posted was not identical to the crime scene. You'd think if he was trying to recreate the crime scene, he would have done it exactly how it was. Now, it is a strange image to be posting, so it does seem like Brad Holder is kind of a strange dude. So the defense is saying Holder has links to at least 4 other alleged suspects. I'm not going to fully name them because law enforcement has never named them suspects. I'm just going to use their first names. The first one is named Elvis, and it's not that Elvis, guys, obviously. This Elvis is from Rushville, and he too is currently claiming on his social media that the defense have defamed him. Now, Elvis has a bit of a fascination with Brad Holder, apparently. Elvis made 4 social media posts, all recreating posts that Holder had made. Note that Detective Kevin Murphy has said that Elvis has the mental capacity of maybe a 7 or 8-year-old, allegedly. Keep that in mind. Guy number 2 is Patrick from Delphi. Guy number 3 is Johnny from Rushville, and guy number 4 is Rod from Rushville. Note that Delphi, Indiana and Rushville are a 2-hour car ride apart. That's approximately 127 miles. So these are not towns that are right next door to one another. If you want to visit someone in Rushville and you live in Delphi, it means you have to commit to a 4-hour round-trip car ride. Elvis supposedly confessed to his sister Mary that he was involved in Libby and Abby's deaths, and he supposedly shared intimate crime scene details. Elvis also allegedly told his sister after February of 2017 that, quote, he now has a brother and is part of a gang. He also allegedly told his sister that Abby was a troublemaker, and that's why he used sticks to form horns on her head. But in February of 2018, when Elvis was questioned by the police, he denied any involvement. But after being dropped back off at his trailer, he walked back to the squad car and he asked if his spit was found on one of the girls, but he could explain it away. Would he still be in trouble? Elvis also allegedly told another of his sisters, a sister named Joyce, that he was on a trail and a bridge with the girls who were killed, and that he would be going away for a long time. The defense says that Elvis's alibi for the day of the crime is probably flawed, and here's why they said that. Elvis's roommate is Rod, and apparently Rod concocted a story about Elvis's whereabouts on February 13th. Rod said that he, Elvis, and a guy named Ned, visions of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, were visiting a sick friend in Muncie when the crime went down. But apparently Rod's story conflicted with what Elvis told law enforcement. The defense thus deemed Elvis's and Rod's alibis, quote, shady. By the way, Elvis's sister Mary passed a polygraph and asked if she was telling the truth about what Elvis had confessed to her about the crime. And then there's Patrick. Patrick lived in Delphi, very close to the crime scene. The defense says fellow Odinites Patrick and Brad Holder were close friends as late as January 21st of 2017, but their friendship ended abruptly in February of 2017 due to a fight they had. This fight supposedly occurred in the woods near a river while they were conducting a ritual when one of them said something the other did not like. The descriptions seem to be alluding to the crime that led to Libby and Abby's deaths. So who knows? An intoxicated Brad Holder told this story to his ex-wife, Amber, who then relayed the story to law enforcement. Brad also allegedly changed his story to Amber and said that Patrick was the guy who committed the crime. He said that Patrick and his people had done in Abby and Libby because one of their mothers was, quote, mixing with other people outside the mother's race, end quote. Brad also said to Amber, quote, I can only protect you so much if you keep asking questions. He told Amber that Patrick had powerful friends. Supposedly, all this info was not shared with the judge when law enforcement in Delphi requested a search warrant for Richard Allen's residence. The defense is arguing that the judge may not have issued the search warrant had he known about these Odinites and their strange behavior and stories. The defense is saying that Patrick provided a very weak alibi as to his whereabouts on February 13th. He told the cops he was home that afternoon, but it sounds like no one was there to back up that story. The defense then talks about this Johnny person from Rushville. He's described as a recruiter for the Odinites, and he supposedly served as a link between Odinites in Delphi and Odinites in Rushville. Johnny is supposedly friends with Brad Holder and Patrick and acquaintances with Elvis and Rod. So Johnny's ex-girlfriend Taylor told the police that she allowed Johnny to use her car on or around Valentine's Day in 2017, so February 14th, 2017. And Taylor claims that when Johnny returned with the car, it had dried blood over one side of it, and Johnny refused to discuss how the blood got there. Taylor said it took several washes to get the red stuff off the car. But Johnny also claimed that he's never been to Delphi, Indiana, despite his friends Patrick and Brad Holder living there. Johnny's ex also said that Johnny and Brad Holder were two of the most violent people she knew, and they were fully capable of being involved in Libby and Abby's deaths. Let's talk a little bit more about Brad Holder and what his ex-wife Amber told the authorities. Per Amber, Brad told her to stay away from Patrick or she would end up dead. Brad also allegedly told her not only was Patrick, along with his crew, responsible for Libby and Abby's deaths, they were also responsible for a fire that killed 2 little girls. Could that mention of a fire be in reference to the fire in Flora that killed 4 little girls? But if so, why would they say 2 little girls? Amber also said that Patrick and his crew had no issue taking out, quote, race traitors, which apparently means white people who mix with other races. This stuff is so offensive, I don't even like saying it out loud. The defense also alleges that Brad Holder got a tattoo of a rune on his hand and he posted photos of it on his social media. This is apparently the same rune that some people believe was arranged in branches on top of Libby's body. Per the defense, the guy in Georgia who sent in a tip on February 16th of 2017, so 3 days after the crime, the tip said, quote, father of Logan Holder, ex-boyfriend of Libby, social media shows him a member of Vinlanders, posts of half-dead women, and fascination with Gothic figures and symbols out of tree branches, end quote. I think the guy got the name wrong when he said Libby instead of Abby there. And on February 17th of 2017, Brad Holder allegedly posted a Goodfellows meme on his Facebook. The meme's meaning was that real friends will help you move bodies and keep their mouths shut. Okay, so the post read, quote, your real ones don't judge you or ask a bunch of questions. They help you move the body and never speak of it again, end quote. Brad Holder also apparently made a social media post at 2 a.m. on February 14th, 2017, 12 hours after the girls went missing. Holder said he was at the gym as his, quote, energy and testosterone is through the roof right now, end quote. Brad, you should have said energy and testosterone were through the roof. You have 2 subjects there. Holder later deleted that post. perhaps out of embarrassment at his subject-verb agreement problem. Holder gave an alibi for the time of the crime, saying he was at work. So that, in a nutshell, is the majority of the odinist theory or angle that the defense shared in this long memo. To me, it all sounds a tad convoluted. So do we believe these 5 men who live 2 hours away from one another got together, planned, and carried out this crime? Or do we believe that Richard Allen, who allegedly confessed to his wife several times and who put himself at the hiking trails on the day the crime occurred, although at a different time, and whose firearm is linked to a bullet that was found between the 2 bodies? And we know that Bridge Guy used a firearm to convince the girls to follow his commands to go down the hill, is the guilty party. For me, the more I look at Bridge Guy, the more I see Richard Allen, 5 feet 4 inch tall Richard Allen. But does it even matter what I think or what you think? Really, it's going to be up to the jury that sits in on the case. How will they drink in all this stuff? They will be the ones to say if Allen's guilty or not guilty. Personally, I'm sticking with the Richard Allen theory. It's just too many people for me to believe that they could all remain mum from law enforcement. You'd think one of them might have ratted the others out by now to get a deal. Also, were these 5 men spotted at the trail system on the day of the crime? Richard Allen admits he was there that day. He literally places himself at the crime scene. I don't think he proactively sought out a park ranger to share that information out of the goodness of his heart. I think he thought it would be better to fess up before the authorities found out he was there and then came to him asking, "Hey dude, why didn't you come forward?" Also, what do these 5 men's cell phones say about their locations on the day of the crime? What cell towers did their phones connect to? None of that information is in the 136-page memo. Is that because nobody bothered to look into that? Or is it because the records showed they weren't anywhere near Delphi? What worries me about this Odinism story is that so many people who love conspiracy theories will simply accept it as truth because it appeals to their love of conspiracies. There's so much we don't know. We don't know what, if anything, the investigators in Delphi did to rule out those 5 men. The only thing in the memo about that was an unnamed Purdue professor who apparently told them this was not the work of people who are into Odinism. We are having to trust in the defense's portrayal of events in this long memo. As the wise people always say, better to wait for the actual trial and you can hear the real evidence for yourself. Until the next time on Bed Crime Stories.